what is really has been attracted to me for Capco is they're actively building their cyber program. So it presents itself for a lot of room of growth, movement, a lot of input in the services we offer.
I think something that you mentioned in the kind of introductory call was that women of colour often face a career plateau when advancing into leadership roles. What do you think needs to change within the industry to create more opportunities, and what has been your approach to overcoming these barriers?
For me, being so young, being able to see people that are industry in my family was really important.
Capco, a Wipro company, is a global management and technology consultancy. For over 25 years, they have combined innovative thinking with deep industry knowledge to deliver business consulting, digital transformation, and technology services to finance and energy markets. Their collaborative and entrepreneurial approach and unique creative culture help clients reduce cost and manage risk in regulatory change while increasing revenues. They are thinkers, innovators, and disruptors, focused on solving their clients' most complex challenges and delivering positive and long-lasting change.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the DevLab Podcast, brought to you by HackerJob. As you'll have just heard from our introduction there, today we're joined by MK, who is a principal cybersecurity consultant at Capco. So MK, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Fantastic. Yeah, great to have you. So look, I think a good place to start in any conversation of this nature is just finding out a little bit more about you and how you ended up in your current role at Capco. So why don't you share a little bit about the career path you've been on so far, maybe what it was that drew you to that career in the first place, and then ultimately how you got to where you are today in the cybersecurity role at Capco.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for that question. I want to say it's a whining bit, but it's actually not. It's quite simple. I'm an immigrant kid, and I am a child who was really analytical and very artsy, trying to decide, am I going to go into the art realm or am I going to do something analytical? And thankfully, I had some guidance in my home who were both programmers. And there was the question of, hey, are you going to be able to pay your rent and take care of yourself when you leave our home? And I think seeing people that look like me being raised in that household and understanding that they're in the STEM field made it attractive and made it something that felt approachable. But also they talked about it from a creative component. You have programmers who are trying to solve problems. So it wasn't just here's this analytical focus, but they said, hey, you like math, you enjoy it, but there's also a creative aspect to solving problems. So this is an area that you can potentially bring the two together. And also, eventually you can get out of our house when you graduate school. So fast forward to that, I studied information technology management as well as finance and economics, because of course you have to layer all of those things together. Started my career in management consulting. And I would say I've pretty much been a management consulting baby for a very long time. Started at Deloitte in the early years doing general computing controls. This is when Sarbanes-Oxley was big in 2008. And I should also caveat this with, in 2008, it was very difficult to find a job. Yeah. So landing something after the market crash was amazing. And I think starting at that particular company provides you with the introduction to learn about this industry and introduction to basically new clients, because it wasn't just, oh, here's a specific market that you're going to go into. I got the opportunity to work with marketing clients. I got the opportunity to work with manufacturing clients, financial institutions. And then that just evolved into, I moved from there, went to SunGuard, did more of the same, and started to focus more on disaster recovery and did a lot of PM work, specifically around pen testing. So that's when it really piqued my interest around regulatory compliance, penetration testing, security, specifically moving from business continuity land to really thinking about disaster and like incident specific response that had to do with technology and how that impacted the real world. And slowly but surely, it's just like we moved from the calling everything information tech to then there was a specificity around like, oh, this is cyber security or this is security. And over the year, it just bloomed into over risk management. The lens got smaller into cyber risk, which is something that I did with the city of New York. They had a New York City Cyber Command, supported them in working on their cyber program and a slew of other things I did there. boomerang back from public back into private and landed at another big four. And then later on, that led me into Capco.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great for our listeners out there just to get that flavor and that understanding of your background and your journey. And I guess to take you back to that original point around the kind of creativity that you do find in technology, has that materialized? Do you find those creative opportunities? Do you find you use your creativity on a day-to-day?
I absolutely do. And I get an opportunity to use it, I think, because while cybersecurity is super technical, right? I didn't take the tradition of my gardens and said, I'm going to go and become a programmer. Well, I did some programming and I understand the underlying security components, took more of, I guess you can say, softer approach with GRC work, cyber risk. And I think a lot of my work now is focused on strategy, right? So with strategy, there's a lot of creativity that comes with that. Our work at Capco really focuses on supporting clients solving their big security issues. And with that, there is the foundational information around like what has the industry been doing since the beginning of time. But then you get into a client that has a complex environment where you're looking at certain areas, let's say vulnerability, patch management, they're really secure and mature. And then you look at another area where they're weak. So thinking about what is the best strategy to bring this other area to maturity, I think all of that has to do with being creative, digging into your historical knowledge of prior clients that you work with to see what solution could potentially be applied here, but customized for this particular client.
Fantastic. And I think that's a great life lesson for anyone out there listening in, really, is just kind of to look under the surface a little bit and look for those opportunities to use your creativity or to use skills that you might not necessarily associate with a certain industry. So no, I think some great insights already. Focusing in on kind of cybersecurity. Obviously, cybersecurity can sometimes feel, I suppose, a bit abstract to those that aren't directly involved in it. How would you break it down and make it understandable for non-technical stakeholders?
Yeah, I think for non-technical stakeholders, so I used to teach at Queens Community College in New York City as an adjunct professor. And with those classes, I taught a class called Computing in the Modern Society. And it was both trying to provide the historical perspective of computing to the students, but also there was a security lens to it. So teaching them about cyber and ensuring that they understood how to keep themselves safe. Not only that, but if you know anything about Queens, is a diverse community. So you have a lot of young people that are the only English speakers in their house. So everybody has a phone. So there's another component of like, how do I make sure that my parent is safe on their phone? How do I make sure they're not getting these texts and clicking on the links? So for that population and even other populations that are working security or security adjacent, I think that the real conversation is remove the jargon, right? Yeah. You have to take away the jargon. And then I think we tend to speak in technical terms that folks are like endpoint security. I don't understand. Vulnerability management assessment. What does that mean? Vulnerability could be many things. It could be vulnerable as an individual. What does this really mean? And I think bringing it into the real world of let's remove the jargon and let's get down to brass tacks. I like to use, I usually use bank robbery with my students for hackers getting in. But another thing is like thinking about just a home, or you live in a community, especially if you're running an organization. You live in a community, on your perimeter, you have a fence, right? To get in, people have like specific access badges that are coming in. What you don't want to do is keep that open every day, and whoever who doesn't belong in there can just come in and out. But even with that first barrier of defense, when you come in, you don't want your neighbors to have all of their houses open. Let's say if the houses are joined, the windows are open, the doors are unlocked, people can just come in and, connect from one area to the next. So I think thinking about it like that in a grounded perspective of if you leave your house insecure, there's a potential that someone could break in. But for executives in particular, you have to speak in brass tacks and dollars. So how is this going to impact you financially? Because people think cybersecurity is not bringing in money, but you have to think from the side of what is cybersecurity going to do for me? It's going to ensure that I don't lose money. If we think about the recent hack that happened with MGM, right? That's the big hotel got hacked. You're just thinking about the vulnerability associated with that. You have people having to open, hotel room with physical keys and you can no longer access your system. You have folks trying to make reservations and that's completely unavailable. So what type of money are you losing on an hourly basis just because no one is able to access anything that they need to do to get to the services that you're trying to provide, right? And how much money are you willing to lose? I think when you speak in those terms and you present cases like MGM, or you present cases like Atlanta, who lost millions and millions of dollars and they got hacked a couple of times as a city, right? I think then there's a pause because people then understand what are the real balance sheet implication of this.
Yeah. And there's that long-term reputational risk as well, right? You become the company that's associated with the hack. And then that has a long tail that can affect you for years.
Absolutely. Because then your customers don't trust you. They don't trust that you have the ability to keep their data safe. And there are lots of questions when the regulators come in after you've been hacked, is understanding how did this incident take place? And did you have the right components in place to safeguard your system, to make sure it was hardened? And the other thing I think that executives have to think about is that regulatory component, especially in finance, because you will get fined. Nobody wants to get fined. And those are not cheap.
Yeah, for sure. You want to be compliant and ready for that audit, long ahead of time, for sure.
Absolutely.
Also, look, I think you're clearly very passionate about cyber risk, which is awesome. I love speaking to people that are passionate about all sorts of different disciplines within technology. How would you describe the current cyber risk landscape, and what do you think the biggest threats companies are facing today?
I think the current cyber risk landscape, I think over the years we've been getting, cyber practitioners have been ringing the alarm that the landscape continues to expand. Hackers are getting more and more sophisticated. And as we are hardening our systems, hardening our toolkits, so are they. Like, hackers don't sleep. I don't say that, but I can't say don't sleep, but they're up at night and making sure that their skill set is elevated, etc. So I think that the landscape of cybersecurity continues to get more complicated, sophisticated, dynamic. And I think over the years, what we're seeing, and especially now that AI has become a buzzword, that's another component that folks have to think about and consider. IoT has been around for a long time, but more and more of those technical pieces are coming online, and we're thinking about like infrastructure components that are coming online, but also you have smaller devices that are also coming online. So we have a lot of these other technologies that are being added to the landscape. And then you just have technological debt around legacy systems that are carrying a slew of vulnerabilities and that have been unpatched for a long time. So there's a lot of these things that we have to consider, the threat associated with it that is being brought to our face by hackers and hacking groups, and their ability to take advantage of the vulnerabilities that are sitting, or new zero days that they can exploit to gain access to systems. So I think these are the major things. And one of the hot topic that has quickly turned global is ransomware. Because ransomware, years ago when we were speaking about it, it was mostly companies were speaking about it. It's become so rampant, it's not just one industry. We have it across health and human services. You have it in the financial sector, you have it in the industrial sector. It has expanded rapidly to the point where now the US government has a program that is extending globally to other countries to think about ransomware threat that is facing all of these nation states at large. So I'm really interested to see where that project goes and some of the policies that comes out of that and how that may influence what we're doing in the industry. Because I think the threat is growing faster than we can meet it. It feels like just plugging holes as you go.
Yeah, I've heard it described as whack-a-mole before. You pop it up, you hit that one, and then the next one's there, and you constantly
another one.
chasing.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. So in this, complex landscape, with these, as you say, different types of threats and hackers and bad actors who are constantly evolving, I suppose disaster recovery then becomes an incredibly important component in terms of how product teams, tech teams are planning, because you have to be ready for that, that instance. So from a cybersec perspective, what are some of the key elements of an effective disaster recovery plan? And how do you think organizations can be better prepared for a breach or an attack?
I've always think about it holistically, because I think sometimes as cybersecurity practitioners, we can silo things and think about the technology only. But there's definitely, for me, a need to understand from the business and through, because as an IT security expert, at the end of the day, you are a service and you're a service to the business. And the job is to ensure that the business is kept safe. So I think an end-to-end full resiliency program is important. Understanding as IT security, what is your role in that, and the support of the overall organization is really important. So if the organization has BIA, business impact analysis, has conducted that, have they identified their critical applications? And do those critical applications that feed into the services that the business provide directly connect to the technologies that we're supporting? And how do we make sure that those technologies then are backed up, they're up and running, security is in place, they're protected, encryption, etc. And so I think ensuring that the business and tech are always in sync and speaking about these things are really critical. Training the business to understand, because there's a level of efficiency and security, and there's always a fuss between those two, right? Trying to move as quickly as you can, but also secure your perimeter. So I think ensuring that the training and teaching is happening around why security is needed, thinking about security first, a security-driven culture is so important, and that's where you do your training and awareness. From a disaster recovery perspective or incident response perspective, making sure that not only do you have a tightly built incident plan in place that considers the business, but also testing the plan. So testing it from a technical perspective with your team, but also bringing in the business to conduct those tabletop exercises to understand if a critical system goes down, how is that impacting them? What does it mean? Pulling out the lesson learned after you've done those drills to ensure that everyone has the key takeaway and action items, and following up on how do you harden and strengthen your environment to support the overall ecosystem. And I think this builds in the flexibility and ability to respond to threats, incidents, or issues that arise because you have not only planned for it, but you've also tested it, versus moving from a reactionary place where there's no plan in place, there's no communication protocol, no one knows who is responsible for what.
Fantastic. Thank you. So no, really, really great to delve into the world of cyber. And I think you've certainly enlightened, I'm sure, a lot of our listeners. Yeah, lots of the nuance that goes into planning ahead and then dealing with threats from a retro perspective. But I want to kind of step away from the tech a little bit for now. I think something that you mentioned in the kind of introductory call was that women of color often face a career plateau when advancing into leadership roles. What do you think needs to change within the industry to create more opportunities, and what has been your approach to overcoming these barriers?
Yeah, I think, it's well studied where, you get really these brilliant women of color in the industries and generally make it to that senior hit, and there's very few that move up to the next. I think it's twofold. It's one, the organization ensuring that they're investing in that group of people. They understand the problem. Not only understand, there's an interest in the problem. There's an understanding of the issue that it's like, generally at this time, this is usually when women of color hit a plateau, and sometimes when they hit the plateau, they leave the industry and just go and start their own business, right? And how do we make sure we keep these superstars here? One, I think having more diverse group of people, for me being so young, being able to see people that are industry in my family is really important. When you are in the industry itself, seeing others that look like you that are at the executive level, at the leadership level, expands your understanding of what you can do, but also the ability to tap on that particular person and say, hey, what did your role look like? What are some of the strategies that you work through to get to this level? And then how did the firm or wherever company you're working in, how did the firm support you in getting to this role? So I think it's twofold. I don't think it's a lack of skill for people to move up to the next level, but I think it's definitely organization interested. Is there actually a strategy to support that move and making sure that both the individual and the companies are coming up with a strategy to get more and more diverse voices in the room? I would tell you, as immigrant, I'm a West African kid. I'm particularly from Liberia. It's been years since I've got into rooms where I've met other people that look like me. But it's been happening more and more recently where I've come across people who are from Liberia that are working in the tech or cyber industry. And I'm in a room with a deputy CISO or CISO or a director. And there's a level of communication that goes beyond the general speak. I tell people I know how to speak English in 3 different dialects, because I can speak Liberian Pidgin, Standard African. So when you come across someone who is from the continent and you can, I guess there's a bit of code switching. You can code switch and really talk about certain things. There's a level of building a relationship that is way faster, and a connection and a benefit to that sometimes is undervalued. Right. Yep. So getting into a room and talking to someone about, oh, I'm from the same place, or, oh my God, I love jollof rice. And they're like, yes, my mom make it. And we have arguments over who has the best jollof rice. Right. Yep. Or just these little background connective tissue that I think that is really valuable. That when you have these diverse group of people in the room, it brings up some interesting things, innovative ideas, and cultural connection that can strengthen a company's overall strategy and connection with their client and expand their portfolio if you are going out to get more customers or whomever you.
And look, I'm sure there's still a very long way to go, but that you are starting to come across, more to in that respect. Why do you think that is? Do you think that is, work that companies have done? Do you think it is people who've blazed that trail and kind of, given people that example to follow? Or I suppose it's a combination of all those different things, right?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of those things. And mind you, it's still I don't know the exact number, but it's still a small percent.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think it's a combination of things. I think it's a willingness of companies who are we're actually putting these programs in place and we want to retain more talent. I remember there was a company I was working for, and at a certain point, they realized that every year, more and more of their POCs were leaving the firm. The turnover rate was just higher than anyone else. And that was concerning for them. So they actually brought all of us together for a whole week and brought in some outside speakers and was truly invested in understanding what is happening here. How are we not protecting you or connecting with you? What is causing so many people to leave the firm? What are we doing wrong and how can we get better? So there was actual deep interest in building framework to support, the group of people. So I think it's a combination of some companies taking it seriously. I think it's young girls, young boys, and more seeing, seeing people who look like them. I think cybersecurity in particular is a bit of a funky field.
Yeah.
So, and by that I mean you have the punk kid, you have the gamers, and I think sometimes people who love anime, they find their community. And when you find people that enjoy the same things you do, it's sort of just that bringing in of these different people because of the connections that you have. But there's still a long way to go. I think we tend to take steps forward, step back, step forward, steps back. So yeah. I do hope more and more I get to see just more people of color in this industry, because I think as we're considering new technologies, we need practitioners, a different perspective to ensure that we're considering everyone as we're building products and tech.
Yeah, look, I'd agree. I think I've worked in the HR kind of tech recruitment space for 10 years now, and it certainly wasn't as much of a conversation even 10 years ago than it is now. And I think, again, as you said, there's still a lot of work to do, but every company is at least talking about it, and every company is at least pushing for it. Now, I'm sure there are some companies that are doing it well, and there are other companies that are paying lip service to it and perhaps not putting their money where their mouth is. But it's certainly a topic of conversation that comes up all the time, and you have programs and you have companies that are really trying to make that difference. So yeah, it's slow progress, but it does feel like there has been a slight shift. So
yeah, and I think when companies see the results of it, they're even more excited, right? It's like, oh, this is good for us.
Yeah, for sure, exactly. You did touch on kind of cyber specifically there in your answer, and I kind of wanted to just pick your brains on that. Do you think there's anything unique to cyber where those diverse voices are even kind of more important in cybersecurity, or is there any nuance to the cybersecurity discipline that you think that diversity kind of adds to?
I don't think cyber is like completely out of the, sort of standard response to this. But I think when people think of cyber, or for the longest when they've thought of cyber, is a specific type of person with a hoodie in the basement, coding. Right. Yeah. And when we think about the makeup of tech leaders in Silicon Valley, that's a particular look and feel to that, right? So I think that there are definitely organizations that are working to change this. For example, there are these two organizations that are really like, there's Girls Who Code and there's also Black Girls Code. And they are actively working to basically support women identifying folks, non-binary folks, this new generation of people, getting them prepared to have a voice in this space. With the investments in the, new generation, I think we'll start to see the makeup of this sector change. And companies tend to, and you've been in HR for a long time, where it's like, we can't find anyone, right? I think for cyber in particular, what we have to think about, where are we recruiting from? There are a bunch of different schools that you can go to, but if you're saying, oh, we're missing people of color, or we're missing like Black people in particular, as part of your HR recruiting process, do you have HBCUs in your funnel? Do you have a list of the top HBCU schools that have engineering that is interested in cybersecurity, right? So making sure that connection is there to inject the diversity that we say we are actually looking for. And when those people come to the table, the other part of it then is like taking their input and their strategy that they're bringing in and valuing the contributions that they're adding to build a better space.
Yeah, for sure. And then, as you've already touched on, that then leads to benefits, positives that the business can take away. But it takes the business to take those positive steps in the first place to then actually get to that point, right? If they take a very dogmatic approach to their recruitment, this is how we've always done it, this is the type of person we hire, this is the persona that we go after, then, that is when it does then become lip service, right? And I think, thankfully, we don't work with many organizations like that, but certainly in the past, I have had conversations with organizations where they want to have their cake and eat it. They want the benefits, they want all of that sort of stuff, but they're not prepared to do this. They're not prepared to compromise here. No, we still want people from top tier universities and all these things. And it's like, okay, great, that's fine. You can take that approach, but you're not going to make any difference.
Right.
Awesome. So coming back, I suppose, to more of the technical side of things very briefly, what does the future of cybersecurity look like to you? And what do you think some of the key trends or developments that you're excited about, or perhaps nervous about, given the cybersecurity risks associated?
Yeah, I think I'm interested in the boring things. Right. It's sort of, I've always been interested in like more foundational building of security, because I think those foundational things are what enable us to innovate. But when I say that, I mean, do you have a good cyber hygiene in place? Do you have a security aware culture? Because those two things lend itself to, as we continue to innovate and think about bringing in more AI into our world, right? Are we considering the security implications of that and preparing for that? because I think AI is very exciting for people now. There's a lot of money, resources that is going into it. But on the other side of this, what are we considering as far as security is concerned? So while I'm excited about this field, there's a part of me that's like, hang on, how are we putting security first as we're running and building this? Because similarly to how we're excited, adversaries are also excited and thinking about how can they best utilize these tools to exploit the different environments. I am interested in cyber insurance, and seeing how that changes as the landscape changes, especially cyber insurance as it is associated to ransomware. So I think when ransomware first was becoming more and more prevalent, cyber insurance came in and said, hey, we can insure you for this and that. And more as it's becoming a huge issue, I think a lot of insurance companies are starting to rethink the levels of protections that they provide to customers around this. So I'm interested to see how that industry grow and shift, and also if there are going to be any sort of regulatory components that's going to come from the government that's going to influence how cybersecurity insurance is provided. So like I said, I get interested in the boring things. Of course, the new tech and people building innovative things, smart cars and all of this stuff is all very, very fantastic and exciting. Don't get me wrong, I'm excited about that. But I think someone who thinks about the risk component of things, you're always thinking, how do we have fun and also protect these like really critical assets that we have? Because now it's you're not just breaking systems, you're impacting people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, it's important, right? You've got to have an adult in the room sometimes, right? You've got to have someone who kind of says, this is cool, this is amazing, this is great, but let's just slow down for 2 seconds and just think about, it from all angles. I think it's great to hear, that clear passion that you have for the discipline, the industry that you work in is awesome. Fantastic. So, final question from me. And then, of course, if there's anything we haven't had the chance to cover, the floor is yours. If there is anything you wanted to share with the audience that we haven't covered. But I wanted to kind of focus for our kind of final question on inspiring the next generation. So what strategies can companies use to bring young people and individuals from diverse backgrounds into the cybersecurity field? I think we've already touched on why it's so crucial to have those diverse voices. But are there any kind of strategies that you think are particularly effective that companies need to be adopting?
Yeah, I think I mentioned a couple of organizations as we were talking that are really thinking about the future generations. So, for example, I think like Girls Code, I believe one of their sponsors was part of that, volunteering for that organization for a while, and I jumped back and forth. I'm not sure if Google is still involved, but I believe one of their sponsors are Google, right? And the participants, the kids, know about that company, right? Because they know that, you're doing a hackathon and is sponsored by Google. And then even so, Google would send some of their staff in to support that. So then you're seeing individuals that work there, you're getting to work with them and to solve problems. You know about the company and what they do. I think there's a need to start involving maybe at an earlier stage with certain organizations, because then they know your name, they know the organization name, they understand the type of work you do. If you are bringing tech to young people, make it approachable. My nephew loves Roblox. Does he know he's coding? Absolutely not. What he knows is he's building worlds. Yeah. Right? He is solving problems. He's building worlds. He can share with his, friends. He built me a whole house with a garage and an underground swimming pool. The other day. But right now, he's already coding in the background and not even thinking about it. So making sure that kids have these tools that they can start to use and are integrated with that is approachable to specifically what they're interested in. And as an organization, if you're interested in the building the new generation of cybersecurity experts, what are the institutions or not-for-profit that are working on that, and how can you get involved in the beginning in supporting those efforts? experts. I mentioned, HBCU. So not only thinking about critically like Harvard and Stanford, all of these schools are the city schools, Rutgers, CUNY, like what are these schools that you can attach your HR pipeline to ensure that you're hiring a diverse group of people, making sure that you're connected with HBCUs to bring in those talents. And I think as you bring in more people, they start to then think about, who are my friends that are interested in this field or my family members? And how do I bring those people into the organization? It's sort of a trickle effect too. And we touched on this earlier. When you bring those people into the organization, do you have a platform to support them?
Yeah.
There is a question I want to go back to about what I'm excited about in cyber. I am excited about the new generation of cyber experts because I think we're going to get a more diverse group of cyber experts. And I think with all of these tools and organizations that are in place, I am curious to see how they are going to shift and change this industry. For Gen Z is not just about dollars. They're interested in climate change. How do I use technology to support that? There's a social aspect to it that I'm excited to see how technology is going to influence that and how this generation, folks that are coming up, the generation of cyber practitioners will influence the landscape overall.
Fantastic. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Fantastic. MK, you've been a phenomenal guest today. I'm sure our listeners out there have learned plenty and have lots to take away. Is there anything else at all that we didn't get the chance to cover that you wanted to share with the audience at all?
I think we've covered, a lot of things today, a slew of different topics. So I'm excited that we got to chat. For folks who are out there looking for cyber jobs and are interested in an organization that strike the balance between finance and cyber, Capco is actively hiring. So you can look on our sites and see if anything piques your interest. The HR would be very happy that I said that. They're not expecting that.
Yeah, for sure. No, always good to mention that for sure. Capco, have a whole range of roles across, multiple different geographies. Obviously today we're speaking to you, based in New York, but globally Capco have a whole host of different roles. We'll make sure in the description of the podcast, we have all of the relevant links. So that wherever you are, whatever discipline you're in, you can navigate and take a look and see if they have something that you'd be interested in and would like to go forward for. And look, Capco is a fantastic organization. I would just encourage anyone out there that is thinking about it, give it a go. Start a conversation and see where things land. It always starts with being brave enough to click that apply or reach out. Fantastic. So look, thank you so much, MK. You've been an incredible guest today. Once again, for our listeners out there, today we've been joined by MK, who is a principal cybersecurity consultant at Capco. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Phil. It's been fantastic chatting with you.
Great. And thanks to everyone for listening in. We'll see you next time.
Great.